Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into two perfectly planned crimes that completely unraveled. And the crazy part? They fell open by elements they completely failed to account for. Now, you might be wondering, can a perfect crime really be foiled by a single silent observer? Well, the fascinating thing here is that no matter how flawlessly a criminal covers their tracks, they can never, ever account for everything that's watching them. When we think of witnesses, we usually think of bystanders, security cameras, or digital footprints. But what happens when the witness isn't a person or a camera, but literally the environment itself? Let's kick things off in October of 1997 with a guy named Kevin Dowling. Kevin was a highly stressed former operations manager who had recently lost his job, and he was working the night shift at a Staples just to scrape by and support his family. He was known as a perfectionist, a real overachiever, but his life was kind of falling apart. And suddenly, he finds himself right in the crosshairs of a major police investigation regarding the brutal murder of a local art gallery owner. So when the police come knocking on his door the morning after the murder, Kevin is just entirely unbothered. He immediately hands over this incredibly well-documented alibi. He proves he was 45 minutes away, fishing out on a peaceful reservoir the exact morning the gallery owner was killed. I mean, he had the whole shebang. Boat rental receipts, bait receipts, his wife backing up his story, and his ultimate trump card, a time-stamped home video of himself out on the water looking perfectly serene. Let's trace how this actually played out, because the discrepancy here is massive. On the morning of October 20th, the time of the murder, Kevin claimed he was fishing, and he had the tape to prove it. Police show up on October 21st, review all his extensive paperwork, and they seemingly buy it. But jump forward just a few days to October 29th. The police come back, they don't even ask for a statement. They just slap handcuffs on him and arrest him for murder. Wait, why did he even do this? The dramatic irony here is absolutely chilling. Kevin is on that home video acting perfectly calm, literally telling himself out loud to smile for his mental health. But the reality? Months prior, Kevin had actually robbed and assaulted that exact same art gallery owner. He lost his operations manager job because of that arrest, and he had a trial looming that he knew for a fact he'd lose. So our perfectionist decided to just eliminate the witness, committing murder before heading out to stage a fake fishing trip. He literally had every single base covered. The bait, the boat, the receipts, the videotape, the timestamps. It was a masterpiece of a cover-up. So what gave him away? How did the police break this ironclad alibi in just 8 days? Well, it turns out Kevin completely overlooked a massive, glowing celestial witness that was staring right down at him the entire time he was filming. The sheer scale of this oversight is staggering. Investigators took a really close look at that video footage, specifically at the light and the shadows. Experts found that the sun's position in his video was way, way too high in the sky for a morning shoot. If he had actually filmed it in the morning, like his timestamp claimed, the sun would have been visibly lower on the horizon. The environment itself was literally testifying against him. Piece by piece, the whole story unraveled. Investigators brought in an expert to analyze that sun angle. Once they knew for sure the video couldn't have been shot in the morning, they zeroed in on the timestamps and proved they had been actively tampered with. Boom! Alibi destroyed. This confirmed Kevin had a completely open window that morning to drive to the gallery, commit the murder, and then casually film his fake alibi later that afternoon. And that single, overlooked detail resulted in a first-degree murder conviction. Kevin's attempt to avoid an assault trial by committing the perfect murder landed him a death sentence. As of April 2026, he's still sitting on death row, awaiting execution, all because he forgot to look up and check the position of the sun. All right, let's shift gears entirely and jump way back to a chaotic July evening in 1942. Picture a Harlem bar in New York City called the Green Parrot. It was a rough neighborhood, violent crime was high, and the bar usually pulled in a pretty tough crowd. On this particular evening, a drunk patron named Robert stumbles in. He's flush with cash from a dice game, and he's carrying a gun. What happens next is sheer chaos. The bar owner, Max Geller, refuses to serve Robert because he's just way too intoxicated. Robert gets humiliated, flies into a rage, pulls his gun, shoots Max right in the face, and just slips away into the panicked crowd. Max unfortunately dies. The shooter is completely gone, and the only key lead police have to work with is one very short, very angry bar regular who is just screaming at the top of his lungs. Investigator Louis Pucco from the DA's office shows up, fully expecting to find cooperative witnesses among the 20 or so people in the bar. But instead, he hits a massive brick wall. In 1942 Harlem, there was a deep distrust of the police. Nobody saw anything, nobody knew anything, just total silence from the crowd. Except for that one short, incredibly angry regular who kept screaming about a robbery. Since no money was actually stolen, the cops just wrote this regular off as being traumatized and confused by the gunfire. Fast forward a whole month, and the case is totally dead. Pucco decides to go back and re-interview everyone. While he's waiting out in the hallway, he overhears two women carelessly chatting in French, totally assuming no one around them understands. They're gossiping that they know who the killer is, but they don't want their husbands to find out they were at that bar. While Pucco happens to speak fluent French, he sets a clever little trap. He isolates one of the women, hits her with a question in English about her husband, and when she plays dumb, he repeats it in flawless French. She immediately breaks down and confesses that the shooter was a regular who wore a black and white checkered suit. Armed with this massive breakthrough, Pucco is ecstatic. He runs back to the office to tell his partner, Detective John Morrissey, a guy known for really thinking outside the box. Pucco spills the whole story about the French women and the checkered suit. Morrissey just sits there, listens, nods, and drops this absolute mic drop of a quote. "I'll do you one better. I know the killer's name." Wait, how on earth did Morrissey know the killer's name? Well, he figured out the impossible by going right back to square one. He asked himself, who exactly was that short, loud, aggressive witness everyone had completely written off as just being traumatized on the night of the murder? Why was he screaming about a robbery when no cash was even taken? Get this, the angry regular wasn't even a human being. It was the bar's namesake, a literal, live, pet green parrot that belonged to the victim, Max. This bird was a total fixture at the bar, known for being aggressive, really short-tempered, and crucially, it was trained to recognize and greet the bar's regular patrons by name. Talk about the ultimate bait and switch. The police on the scene heard this squawking bird, and given the absolute chaos of a bar shooting, they naturally assumed it was terrified and screaming, "Robbery, robber!" But Morrissey realized that the bird wasn't describing the crime at all. It was actually screaming, "Robert, Robert!" The parrot was literally naming the killer it had just watched shoot its owner. Detectives immediately put two and two together. They take the name Robert from their feathered informant, combine it with the flashy black and white checkered suit description from the French-speaking women, and boom! Very quickly, they track down 28-year-old cab driver Robert Butler, who had actually fled all the way to Baltimore right after the shooting. When detectives finally catch up to Butler, they lay out exactly how he got busted. They tell him they didn't just have eyewitnesses, his victim's pet parrot was their star witness. Butler, realizing the sheer absurdity of being outsmarted by a bird, doesn't even put up a fight. He just gives this incredibly dry, straightforward confession saying, "I never did like that bird." And with that, the entire bizarre mystery comes to a close. Robert Butler was convicted of manslaughter and handed a 15-year prison sentence. And it was all thanks to an aggressive, green-feathered informant who absolutely refused to stay quiet while justice was on the line. So what's the big takeaway from this explainer? Whether it's the unblinking sun high up in the sky exposing a tempered videotape or a squawking pet parrot screaming from its perch, justice almost always finds a way. Criminals can plan for the police, they can plan for human witnesses, but they can never plan for the environment itself. I'll leave you with this provocative thought. Even when you think you've covered every single track, are any of us ever truly alone?